midnight fog rolls off the dark waves of the Pacific Ocean and swallows the coastline of Coronado Island in a thick blanket of white mist. Rising from this spectral haze is the Hotel del Coronado, with its iconic red turrets and sprawling Victorian architecture, looking less like a vacation resort and more like a fortress of secrets. The sound of the crashing waves rhythmically pounds against the shore like a slow and steady heartbeat that refuses to stop. For over a century, this grand establishment has hosted presidents and royalty and celebrities who sought luxury within its wooden walls. But among the living guests, there walks a permanent resident who never checks out and whose tragic history has stained the very foundation of this historic landmark. The air here feels heavy with the weight of the past, and those who walk the corridors at night often report the sensation of being watched by unseen eyes that stare from the shadows. Construction of this wooden leviathan began in the late 19th century, and it stood as a testament to the ambition of the American dream during the height of the Victorian era. It was a place where the wealthy and the well-to-do could escape the grime of the cities and indulge in the healing powers of the sea air and the lavish amenities provided by the hotel staff. The intricate woodwork and the grand ballroom were designed to impress and to provide a backdrop for the high society galas that defined the social calendar of the time. However, beneath the veneer of gilded luxury and polite society, there existed an undercurrent of desperation and loneliness that often accompanies those who have everything yet possess nothing. It is within this contrast of bright electric lights and deep dark corners that our story takes root, involving a woman whose name would become synonymous with the hotel itself. In the year 1892, a young woman arrived at the Hotel del Coronado alone, and looking incredibly weary from a long journey across the country. She was beautiful in a melancholy sort of way, with dark eyes that seemed to hold a vast ocean of sorrow, and a demeanor that suggested she was waiting for someone of great importance to join her. She signed the guest register under the name Lottie Bernard, which was later discovered to be a pseudonym used to hide her true identity of Kate Morgan. She was a woman in her mid-20s who had traveled from the cold Midwest in hopes of reuniting with an estranged husband, or perhaps a lover, who had promised to meet her there. She carried very little luggage with her, which suggested she did not plan on a long stay, or perhaps she had left her previous life in a great hurry. The staff at the front desk noticed her agitation immediately, as she constantly checked the entrance, and asked if there were any messages waiting for her from a gentleman. She was assigned a room that offered a view of the ocean, but she spent very little time admiring the scenery, and instead paced the floorboards of her quarters with a nervous energy that disturbed those in the adjacent rooms. The Victorian era was a time of strict social rules, and a woman staying alone at such a prestigious hotel was already a subject of quiet gossip among the employees and the other guests. Kate Morgan did not seem to care about the whispers or the sideways glances she received in the dining hall, because her mind was entirely consumed by the absence of the man she was waiting for. Days turned into a week, and still the man did not appear, leaving Kate to descend further into a pit of despair. The room she occupied became a prison of her own making, where the walls seemed to close in on her, as the silence became deafeningly loud in the absence of her lover's voice. It is said that she spent hours staring into the vanity mirror, examining her reflection, and wondering what she had done to deserve such abandonment. The maid's service reported that she often refused to let them in to clean, and when they did catch a glimpse of her, she looked pale and sickly, as if the life was slowly draining out of her body. She complained of various ailments to the hotel staff and requested whiskey and quinine to soothe her nerves and her stomach, but nothing seemed to provide her with the relief she so desperately sought. The grand luxury of the Hotel del Coronado had become a mocking backdrop to her internal suffering. As the Thanksgiving holiday approached, the atmosphere in the hotel was festive and filled with the laughter of families gathering together for the celebration. This joy only served to highlight the isolation that Kate Morgan felt as she wandered the halls like a ghost. Before she had even died, she eventually ventured into the city of San Diego, where she purchased a handgun from a local shop, seemingly having made a dark decision about how her stay would end. The clerk who sold her the weapon later recalled that she seemed calm and detached, as if she were merely running a mundane errand rather than preparing for a tragedy. She returned to the hotel with the weapon concealed within the folds of her dress, and the weight of the cold steel against her side must have been a constant reminder of the finality of her plan. The weather turned foul on the night of November 28th, 1892, with a storm that battered the coast with fierce winds and relentless rain. The hotel groaned under the assault of the elements as the wooden beams shifted and settled, making noises that sounded like hushed whispers in the dark. Kate Morgan sat in her room, listening to the storm, and perhaps feeling a kinship with the chaotic violence of the weather outside. She wrote no suicide note that explained her actions or absolved anyone of guilt, which left her final thoughts a mystery that would fuel legends for decades to come. The hopelessness that had been building inside her had finally reached a breaking point, where the prospect of death seemed more comforting than another day of waiting. Early the next morning, the storm had passed, and the sky was a bruised purple as the sun began to rise over the horizon. The body of Kate Morgan was found on the exterior staircase leading down to the beach with a single gunshot wound to her temple, and the gun lying near her cold hand. The discovery sent a shockwave through the hotel and the local community, as the beautiful stranger who had kept to herself was now the center of a tragic scandal. The coroner officially ruled it a suicide due to the nature of the wound and the recent purchase of the weapon. But rumors began to swirl immediately about foul play or a lover's quarrel gone wrong. Her body was removed, but the energy of her despair seemed to have seeped into the wood and the stone of the hotel itself. For many years after her death, the story of Kate Morgan was told in hushed tones by the staff who worked the night shift and claimed to see strange things in the corridors. Guests would report feeling sudden drops in temperature that would chill them to the bone, even on the warmest of summer nights. The room where she stayed, and the room now known as Room 207, became focal points for paranormal activity that defied all logical explanation. It was as if Kate Morgan had refused to move on to the afterlife and was instead trapped in a loop of waiting and sorrow that bound her spirit to the physical location of her demise. The hotel embraced its reputation over time, but for those who encountered the entity, it was a terrifying ordeal. One particularly chilling account involves a businessman who checked into room 207 in the late 1980s, seeking a quiet place to prepare for a conference. He was a man of science and logic who did not believe in ghosts or things that go bump in the night. He unpacked his suitcase and set up his work on the small desk in the corner of the room, feeling quite satisfied with the accommodations. As he worked late into the night, he began to feel a strange sensation, as if someone were standing directly behind him and reading over his shoulder. He turned around, expecting to see a member of the housekeeping staff who had entered by mistake. But the room was completely empty. He shrugged off the feeling as fatigue and returned to his papers. But the atmosphere in the room had shifted undeniably toward something malevolent. The air grew heavy and thick, making it difficult to breathe. And the lights in the room began to flicker rhythmically. He watched in disbelief as the television set turned on by itself and blasted static at full volume before shutting off just as abruptly. His heart began to race as he realized that he was not alone in the room and that his skepticism was being challenged by a force he could not comprehend. He stood up to leave, but found that the door to the hallway would not budge, as if it were being held shut from the other side by a strong hand. The temperature in room 207 plummeted, causing his breath to mist in the air before him. The mirrors in the room began to fog up from the inside out, and he watched in horror as words began to form in the condensation. The letters were traced by an invisible finger and spelled out a plea for help that sent shivers down his spine. He backed away from the vanity until his back hit the wall and he felt icy fingers brush against the back of his neck. He spun around, but there was nothing there but the floral wallpaper and the oppressive silence that had returned to the room. The businessman was now sweating profusely despite the freezing cold that permeated the space. He decided to try the phone to call the front desk, but the line was dead and emitted only a low static hum that sounded vaguely like a woman weeping. Panic began to set in as he felt truly trapped in a nightmare from which he could not wake. He moved toward the window thinking he might open it to get some fresh air, but the latch was jammed tight. It was then that he saw her standing by the bathroom door. She was wearing a black Victorian dress with a high collar, and her face was obscured by shadows. She stood perfectly still, with her hands clasped in front of her, looking down at the floor. The businessman froze in terror, unable to speak or move. As the figure slowly raised her head to look at him, her face was pale and beautiful, but her eyes were dark voids that seemed to suck the light out of the room. She did not speak, but he heard a voice inside his head that sounded like a sorrowful whisper asking where he was. It was not a question directed at him, but rather a repetition of the question she had asked herself 1,000 times while she waited for her lover. The sadness radiating from her was so intense that the man felt tears welling up in his own eyes as he was forced to experience her grief. As suddenly as she had appeared, the figure dissolved into mist, and the lights in the room flared back to full brightness. The door to the hallway clicked audibly as the lock disengaged, and the temperature returned to normal. The businessman did not wait to pack his belongings, but grabbed his briefcase and fled the room, running down the hallway until he reached the lobby. He checked out immediately despite it being 3 a.m, and refused to give a reason to the night clerk, who watched him leave with a knowing look. He never returned to the Hotel del Coronado, but the memory of that night haunted him for the rest of his life. Another incident occurred involving a young couple who were staying in the room for their honeymoon and were unaware of the dark history associated with it. They awoke in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps pacing back and forth at the foot of their bed. At first, they thought it was someone in the hallway, but the sound was distinctly coming from inside the room on the carpeted floor. The husband reached out to turn on the bedside lamp, but the bulb shattered with a loud pop, plunging them into total darkness. The footsteps stopped immediately and were replaced by the sound of heavy breathing right next to the wife's ear. The wife screamed and scrambled out of bed, pulling the sheets with her as she backed into the corner of the room. The husband managed to use the light from his watch to scan the room, but saw no intruder. However, the items on the dresser began to slide across the surface on their own and crash onto the floor one by one. Perfume bottles and jewelry were swept away by an invisible arm in a fit of spectral rage. The couple fled the room in their pajamas and demanded to be moved to a different wing of the hotel, refusing to step foot back in room 207, even to retrieve their clothes. The hotel staff have their own stories to tell, and many of them refuse to enter certain rooms alone or to work the night shift on the third floor. Housekeepers have reported making the bed in room 207 only to turn around and find the pillows indented as if someone had just laid their head down. Others have reported seeing the indentation of a body form on the mattress while they were standing right there watching in disbelief. Towels are often found rearranged or thrown into the bathtub, and the water faucets turn on and off of their own accord, flooding the bathroom with scalding hot water. The gift shop at the hotel is another area of high activity where items are frequently thrown from the shelves or rearranged when no one is looking. It is said that Kate Morgan often visited the store during her stay, and perhaps her spirit still lingers there, browsing the merchandise for something she can never buy. Employees have reported hearing a woman clearing her throat behind them, only to turn and find the aisle empty. The security cameras have occasionally captured orbs of light and strange mists moving through the store after hours, which defies any logical explanation involving dust or insects. Paranormal investigators from all over the world have flocked to the Hotel del Coronado in hopes of capturing evidence of the haunting. They have set up cameras and audio recorders in room 207 and have captured electronic voice phenomena that are chillingly clear. Voices saying "help me" and "get out" have been recorded in the dead of night when the room was verifiably empty. Thermal cameras have captured human-shaped anomalies standing by the window or sitting in the chair, gazing out at the ocean. The evidence suggests that something intelligent and aware resides within the walls of the hotel. Skeptics argue that the stories are merely the result of overactive imaginations and the power of suggestion, fueled by the tragic history of the hotel. They claim that the old building is drafty and that the electrical wiring is outdated, which explains the lights and the cold spots. However, even the most hardened skeptics often have a difficult time explaining the sheer volume of corroborating reports from people who had no prior knowledge of the ghost story. The consistency of the details involving the woman in the black dress and the overwhelming feeling of sadness suggests a genuine paranormal phenomenon. The legend of the beautiful stranger has become an integral part of the identity of the Hotel del Coronado, drawing tourists who hope to catch a glimpse of the ghost. The hotel embraces the history, but also warns guests that the spirits are not a paid attraction, but a part of the reality of staying in such an old place. The tragedy of Kate Morgan is not just a scary story, but a heartbreaking tale of a woman who was abandoned and lost all hope. Her spirit seems trapped in the moment of her greatest pain, unable to move forward and unable to go back. Some believe that Kate is not the only spirit haunting the hotel, and that there are other guests who checked in and never really checked out. There are stories of a Victorian girl who plays in the hallways and a gentleman who smokes cigars on the balcony. But it is Kate who commands the most attention and whose presence is the most powerful. Room 207 remains the epicenter of the activity, a place where the barrier between the living and the dead is exceedingly thin. Those who stay there often leave with a newfound belief in the supernatural. The question remains as to why Kate Morgan continues to haunt the hotel more than a century after her death. Is she still waiting for the man who never came? Or is she afraid to face judgment for taking her own life? Some theories suggest that she does not know she is dead and continues her daily routine of waiting and hoping. Others believe she is angry and wants the living to feel a fraction of the pain she endured during her final days. Whatever the reason, her presence is a constant reminder that love and loss can leave a mark that transcends death itself. The ocean winds continue to batter the Hotel del Coronado, stripping the paint and weathering the wood just as time weathers the memories of the living. Yet the memory of Kate Morgan remains fresh and vivid, kept alive by the encounters of terrifying reality experienced by guests. The hotel stands as a monument to a bygone era, but also as a mausoleum for a broken heart. The red roof tiles gleam in the sun, but at night they merge with the darkness that shrouds the mysteries within. If you ever find yourself walking the corridors of the Hotel del Coronado late at night, pay close attention to the shadows and the sudden changes in temperature. You might just catch a glimpse of a woman in a black lace dress turning a corner just ahead of you. Do not try to follow her, for she is not looking for company, but rather for a salvation that will never come. She is the eternal guest of room 207, and she does not take kindly to intruders in her domain. The tragic tale of Kate Morgan serves as a cautionary story about the destructive power of despair and the way extreme emotions can imprint upon a place. The Hotel del Coronado is a beautiful masterpiece of architecture, but it is also a vessel for the souls that have passed through its doors. The wooden walls have absorbed the laughter and the tears of millions, but they hold onto the sorrow of one woman with a tight grip. It is a grip that refuses to loosen no matter how many years pass. As the sun sets over the Pacific and the guests retire to their rooms, the hotel undergoes a transformation from a bustling resort to a quiet palace of echoes. The sounds of the day fade away, leaving only the creaking of the floorboards and the distant roar of the ocean. It is in this silence that the past comes alive, and the ghost of room 207 begins her nightly vigil. She walks the path she walked in life, hoping for a different outcome that is impossible to achieve. So the next time you book a room at a historic hotel, remember that you are sharing the space with history, and perhaps with the entities that history has left behind. You may think you are alone as you lock the door and turn out the light, but in places like the Hotel del Coronado, you are never truly alone. The eyes of the past are always watching and waiting in the dark corners of the room. Sleep tight and pray that the only thing that wakes you is the morning sun. The ghost of room 207 is more than just a campfire story. It is a chilling reality for those who have looked into her void like eyes. She is a permanent fixture of the California coast, a tragic figure frozen in time. Her story continues to be written with every scream and every hurried checkout, adding new chapters to a book that has no end. The Hotel del Coronado will stand for many more years, and so too will the spirit of Kate Morgan, waiting eternally for a lover who will never arrive.